Do you have team members that are just driving you crazy? Would you like to learn how to successfully communicate with your team? We want to share those success stories with you today. Welcome back to the Help for Leaders podcast. I'm Stacey Harris. But before we jump into today's episode, click here to subscribe, hit that thumbs up, click the bell to be notified each week when we post new content. Today, I've got a special guest, Juan Kingsbury, joining me. He is here from Phoenix, Arizona, in town. Welcome, Juan. Why don't you introduce yourself?
So Juan Kingsbury, career blind spot, using the same tools as Stacey. We'll share about how I filled in for her reluctantly for me filling in. But I was very honored and that she trusted. So training DISC, the motivators, driving forces, EQ workshops, and just love to see the tools used, especially for team building, which we'll be sharing a couple anecdotes today.
Yeah. So I've worked with a major multimedia broadcasting company for years, and they're in New York City. They are in an iconic building in that city. And I've traveled there so many times, done tons of training, but never in the one building that I always wanted to go to, the Juan building. And so I had a conflict. I was already committed to do another client session, and I partnered with Juan for years. He does a lot of training for me, or has in the past. We're hoping. COVID has put a little glitch in all of that, so we're hoping that that's going to continue and increase. But this particular story, I was sending Juan to New York to do some team building for this particular client. I don't really know exactly where he's going to be training. And then he calls me to tell me that he's going to be where I have wanted to be. And then not only does he tell me, you send me photos.
Is that why you send me photos all the time?
Yes.
To get me back? Oh, I was sharing the experience, but yeah, I don't know what you want me to say. I loved it. I felt honored. It's a running joke that we have, but it was a big, it was actually both. I went 2 times.
You did go, I know, twice.
2 years in a row you weren't happy with me, but both facilities were awesome as a presenter, but also having two different groups of people. The second one actually had a remote team. This is way before Zoom and stuff has taken over our lives. It wasn't so easy to have separate
so when you
people.
work with these companies that are multimedia and they have all the technology, as a facilitator and a trainer, when you go into those kind of training rooms, it
just made my life easier. But the groups of people, like the first group was all accountants, and also they were very tired accountants. and so one of the advantages we have as facilitators is who's coming, not just in names but in disc styles. And it might have been it was disc and driving force, because I always like to put the emphasis of, I think 90% of them were some version of steady compliant. But when you see someone is very intellectual, loving to learn, etc., versus their peer who's very instinctive, why are we reinventing the rules? Why do we have to do these things? Why am I in this workshop? I already know this stuff. It gave them a chance to see themselves in relation to a bigger group. So, even they're tired, it's hard. I was like, okay, I'm a high, and we were talking about you adapting and coming in. I was like, I really had to work on that. It was cognizant. I didn't compromise who I was, because I wanted to enjoy myself as well. But really leaning into like, you guys are catching every inconsistency or a little, font size that might have been off on the slide deck. But that was great. And I'm not trying to rub it in that I went there, but I was sharing pictures.
Yes, you are sharing pictures. I have since been there, so I was able to check that off my list, and it was a lot of fun. It's a great client. But we've done some amazing things with teams, really helping teams understand themselves, understand how to communicate, understand the dynamics of, oh man, that's why you rub me wrong. That's why I just don't understand. Like, we're coming at things in a totally different perspective. Maybe I'm forcing all of my knowledge down your throat in a way that feels very aggressive and assertive, even though I might be a really low D person, because of my theoretical or that drive for information. So,
well, I'll say this, in every team session, And if you haven't done it, I really encourage you to even just to do the exercise of making the team wheel.
Yeah.
But especially if you get a team report, and then especially you take the time to have everyone come together. But just simply the visual of the team wheel. It's like, oh, you can see, a good chunk of people fall on one side, and there's always a couple outliers.
Yeah.
And so that, there's self-awareness when you see the assessment for yourself, you go through one-on-one, and then there's this not just team awareness of here's everyone else, but it's like, oh, here's how I'm relating to everyone else.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's always, maybe not always, but a good amount, there's always someone who doesn't quite like I'm not a high I. I don't like to talk a lot. What are you talking about? And just all their peers are
just laughing. Yes.
So it's just something you can't replicate, by yourself.
Yeah.
And even reading everyone else's assessment. So do that team wheel, but those team workshop with these accountants, and the other group was more media or marketing, a diverse group. But you can see the wheel, it's kind of like a map. On the left side, a majority of them were there, and there are a couple high I's. On the other side, it's like, oh, and it's not, it's not a blanket, but it's that collective aha is what you get every time. Definitely. I mean, it's my claim to fame. I always brag about doing that. Maybe not the views so much, but it's reaching them on where they're at and being steady, compliant, but also seeing like, oh, we're not all carbon copies of each other.
Right.
And so, but to see that as they relate to the whole, as well as how the whole relates to them, is the beauty and the benefit of
being. So we've also worked with teams that go through an assessment, go through training, and then they don't apply.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We've had several of those where it's just, oh, that was a cool workshop. Next. And what we found is it actually takes intentionality to flex your style. It takes just a concerted effort to actually do something different. Because if we're not aware, we're going to slide back to what's most comfortable, which is our natural style. And we'll get back in those same ruts that we were in. And then you have team members that are super disappointed.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's like, wait, we learned all this stuff about ourselves. We were doing the work. We were actually meeting each other in the middle. We were flexing, but now, So what do you say to those teams? Like, have you ever come across those?
All the time. And it starts at the top with the leader. You know, if they're going to practice it, you can't make everyone, but the odds go up. But definitely if you're not, people still might practice it, but after a while they're like, oh, you're why am I going to adapt to you if you're not going to adapt to me? And I think those people with higher EQ, they have a good motivation, and they're like, I'm going to do a good job anyway, but chances are they might not feel reciprocated on your team, and therefore decide there's greener pastures. But yeah, I see it all the time. And also, it's not, I can point my finger, but you're busy. Your job isn't to be an EQ expert or a DIS expert. But even if you are memorizing the stuff, doesn't necessarily mean you're using it. So chances are you're at a team workshop and your peers are, because you have work to do, and there's either a good, or sometimes like with the nice building in New York, it was like, hey, this group has worked really hard and we want to give them something to kind of let off some steam, but also team build. But that's the person in charge deciding, hey, my team is worth it. And what's the old adage of like, investing in people, and if you don't, well, they stay, but if you do, they still might leave. But imagine the better quality relationship. So it always starts with the person at top. And if you take the assessment and you do a workshop, that's great, but like, take it out again, and reapply it. And the flex word is so key. Really, any leader, I think you can get away with not flexing if you're in a very black and white job. It's the same thing every day. But if you're going to truly lead people and you're going to deal with problems and crisis and random things, you really need to learn how to flex if you actually want people to get on board with your ideas and adjust to change. If you don't want to flex, you can still expect them to, and maybe play some authority cards, but that doesn't always go as the way we plan. So yeah, I see it all the time. People, if you come in saying, I'm going to take the medicine too, or at least be interested. I love skeptics. I love when people push back, because you're not the only one who asks the question.
Right.
But this assessment isn't a whole complete measurement of who you are. However, it does give you really good insights of how you want to communicate, how much you want to flex or not flex.
Right.
And to see that with your peers and realize, oh, I'm more flexible. Maybe they're not so much. It's not a right or wrong, but it's good information to make intentional decisions for the betterment of your team, but also for productivity at work or whatever your mission is.
So I'm going to flip the script, and I'm going to put you on the spot. And there was a different client that I had Juan go do some training for me.
Oh, yeah. That was the first one.
Was that the first one? Okay, so...
This is where she's comparing us, that she's better than,
This is not. But on the first break, I get a 911 phone call.
Oh, we need some context, Stacey.
From you. Okay, some context.
Stacey says, hey, Juan, can you fill in for me? Can't be in 2 weeks. I would love to. I'm very honored that you trust me with your clients. It's a big deal for my small world. But I said, well, what do I need to know? Juan, I trust you. Do whatever you want, because it's DISC. We're not reinventing the wheel. Well, I get there, and to jump in where she's saying, about 45 minutes in, maybe an hour.
So I will preface, so this particular client I had done a lot of work with, and this team knew me personally. I had been in their office many times. And so, they have an expectation, and I didn't think about that.
Yeah, well, I think to your point, the one person did, but the rest of the group didn't. And that one person, going back to leadership, was dictating what was matter. And this is a lesson, now that's something I take for granted, but it was that kind of flashpoint of I decided, hey, I might be the expert, but if I'm not explaining this in a way that resonates with these people, it's, they might be polite and nod their heads, but it's not really going to grab them. Well, until I learned that lesson, what happened was this woman calls me out, and she wasn't mean, but on the side, she basically says, this isn't how Stacey does it. And in my head, I'm like, well, how the heck does Stacey do? So I call her, and I wasn't mad, but I was like, hey, apparently there are some expectations. I think I know what I want to do, but tell me how Stacey does it so I at least can get close. And I can't remember the exact exercises, but I called an audible. I look at the information, the DISC styles, the driving forces, motivators at the time, I think. And I'm like, what's going to kind of say, move your blood? What's going to get you up? And first of all, that's a big one. Getting people to physically get up out of their seat. Yeah. That's a huge thing. You can only do so much sitting down. But I ended up making this a version of a different exercise where I had them kind of selling each other. And again, this different group, this was in the accountants, but of hey, try to sell Stacey a car, and they would do it, just kind of shoot from the hip. But then it's well, hey, everyone, help them out. What's Stacey's DISC style? What's her driving forces? And then it was great. It was she was like, this is so great, da da da. You're better than Stacey. No, she didn't. But so I had to really flex, because I'm a high dominant. I don't like to keep it nice and tight. I like to be amorphous and adjust. But she had expectations, and that was it could have been really bad. It wasn't. But if anything, for my driving forces, I'm really happy. Commanding. Stacey Harris trusted me. Stacey Harris' client didn't like me. And then she did. So it resonates with me.
Yeah, you pivoted beautifully and saved the day and got everyone back on the same page with her expectations, and then the application. I think that's what clients really want to see. We've got so much knowledge that we have to, share with them as far as kind of lecture, but then that application piece really took it home.
And there's a really important thing here. If this isn't on topic, I think, it is. It's one thing to see the assessment. It's another thing to go over it with your team and see them. It's another thing to apply it. Yes. It's another thing to do it again and again. This shouldn't be a one and done tool.
Right.
But imagine, and this is what happened, the person there, and I'm revisionist history, already had a good expectation. She's seen you do it. There might have been a one-on-one with her. I can't recall the dynamic of the group. So sometimes you might get 50-50. Oh, I know DISC. I'm really good at it. Now, some of them might think they're an 8 out of 10 and really they're a 4, but that's a lot higher than someone who's never seen DISC before. And I'm always surprised. Some people have no idea what these concepts are.
Right.
So imagine have some empathy for a school teacher who has a bunch of 4th graders, all different levels of math. And today we have to learn our times tables. That's a hard challenge, not impossible, but it's reinforces that, especially if you care about your team. It's one thing to know your style. Where are they at? Where are they at in relation to each other? The goal is not to master DISC. The goal is to use this so you can do your job and fit and communicate effectively. And I'll go back to my goal. My goal wasn't to say all the right answers of DISC. My goal was, I hope this client is happy so that Stacy feels like she can trust me again, and send me out to somewhere else to a fancy building in New York City. So I
have. And so I love our partnership. I love that we can work together, and it's been a joy. So I hope you've learned something today, listening to how we've worked with teams, how it's worked, how it hasn't worked, and then how to get back on track of actually applying. But it does start with the leader. That's super important. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Join us next week because we've got more stories about clients and how to use assessments successfully. If you enjoyed this episode and would like more information on emotional intelligence, behavioral styles, or communication, I'd love for you to click here to watch more episodes. And we'd also love for you to click here to subscribe so you're notified each week when we post more content.